I'll have Carol introduce herself to you. She's my mentor and facilitator partner for my course, the Coach Credential Prep course. We came up with this idea. Wow, it's going on like 3 years ago already. And
wow.
we really worked well together. And what a bonus to have two MCCs facilitate you today. That's what we try to replicate in our course. So Carol, why don't you give us a little introduction of who you are and what you do?
And how, well, I think you already did that part. So I actually live not too far from Mercy. I actually live very close to Mercy's daughter, which is just west of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the east coast of the United States. And we are all rooting for the Eagles in the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Mercy and I went to ICA, the International Coach Academy, together. So we've actually known of each other and been on Zoom for, gosh, almost 2 decades now, my friend. And we have yet to meet in person. So it's one of those things that we're going to try to do, especially since we don't live all that far from one another. But yes, so I am a coach trainer and a mentor coach, as some of you already know. And then actually have some private practice coaching as well. My background is actually about 25 years as a professional musician and about 12 years in law. So I've got 3 kids, all of whom are just about married. I have one that's just about to be married. And out of that, I have 3 lawyers in my family. So, yeah.
All right. So, yeah, it is funny that, you know, we've known each other for probably 21 years.
Yeah.
And we live literally 3 hours from each other, but you know, that's really so common these days.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just quickly answering somebody in the chat. All right.
Good to see so many faces.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we like to get off to a robust start. And I'm just going to finish this and then we'll get started. So you saw how I titled this. We know, Carol and I know, that there are many mindsets, beliefs, ideas that get in the way of you telling it like it is. And that is what essentially direct communication is. The ICF embedded direct communication into the competency of evoking awareness. Put me in the corner with, and I'm not alone, that this should be a standalone competency. Because it does, of course, the end game is that it evokes awareness, and this is the time to use it. And when we hesitate to use it, what happens is, our sessions get longer, our client is likely to give us a little more story. Maybe we're not challenging them enough. Maybe we're uncomfortable with how to say it. So today, that's our main goal, getting more comfortable with it. What is it really? And what is the language around it that you can take and start using right away? So Carol, what would you add to that?
I think one of the reasons that we have trouble with it is that we all, as coaches, have what I call the overabundance of a helping gene. And we feel as though we are maybe not allowed to say something that is very direct, or we have this misimpression that direct needs to also be aggressive. Right. And that is actually one of the myths that we hope to dispel today.
Good, good. So just take a minute now to open up the channels, as I like to say. I love this kind of breathing. I don't generally instruct people to do it, but I find that when you're taking in new information or a new perspective on the information you know, it's good to just take a moment. And, you know, I like this deep breathing, and then you hold your breath and then you breathe again. So why don't we all do that together? It takes, 20 seconds. You can go off camera if you want, but I'll stay here to help us. So I go down for 8 counts. So it's hold for 4. Blow it out for 8. All right. This is a nice weapon or tool rather, when we're fighting, we're not focused in a session. We're harried or hungry or angry, lonely, or tired. It's really good to just do that kind of breathing. There's a lot of neuroscience around that particular technique. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. So let's get down to business here. Let me share my screen and here we go. Where did we go? And if you want, before I share my screen, let me hear from you guys. What is your challenge? What is your challenge to direct communication? Or maybe you sense that you don't have a problem, but you're open to something else. So just raise your hand or raise your other hand and just tell us why you came here today. Where are you in the world and what is it you'd hope to get from this session today? So who's going to start us off? All right, Angela, and then Emily.
Good morning. So the reason why I'm here is because I am finding myself being aware that I am slipping more and more into advice giving and having that kind of coaching. And I know I've got to do something to get back on the right track. So that's why I'm here.
Right. So Carol's response, kind of observation about the helping gene. That's a good, and thank you for being so honest about it. It's, we do want to fix things. I don't know about you, but no one ever rewarded me for listening. They've rewarded me for getting something done. So it is a whole new paradigm. Let's see, who was next? I named people. Emily.
Yeah, Emily.
Thanks, Carol.
I'm Emily. I'm near Toronto, Ontario, up in Canada. And I'm here because direct communication is something that I struggle with. I would prefer to not say anything that might potentially offend somebody or hurt their feelings. And I definitely was raised that way and lived most of my life that way. So to say things that might be, jarring or like not aggressive, but can raise some emotions, it's not my instinct. So
got it. Okay. Izzy.
Hi guys. Like you all know, some of you, my name is Isolke, but since some of us can't really pronounce my name, I am for short Izzy. So the reason I joined this masterclass today is because I wanted to know how to use the direct communication to get through to people. I think many of us struggle to really get through, or get the message through that person understanding what you're trying to tell them, or, and using, I would say, the gist of listening, because we tend to say a lot of things, but are we actually listening to where this, I could say, the state of the person coming from? So yes, and then the actual curiosity questions that goes with that. I think that is the main reason why I think Merci has also put this whole package together, is really to go in deeper and find out where's this person coming from and how can you help the person get from one place to the next. And as I grew up, I obviously struggled with a lot of communication myself, so I was also in the boat. But while I grew throughout my journey of just coaching and wellness and health industry area, I learned to obviously listen, so my listening improved a lot. But the direct communication, I can still see that it needs a lot of room of improvement. So yes, that's my story.
All right, thanks, Izzy.
Tatiana.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Merci. So I'm Tatiana, I'm based in Switzerland. For me, I'm here now because for me it's also challenging, the direct communication. Some of the reasons were mentioned before. I'm afraid of hurting the other person and maybe annoying them. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to know how to do it in a better way.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, Caroline.
Good morning. So I'm in San Francisco, California, and I guess for me, I'm here because in terms of direct communication, it's when I'm in a session with a client, I have the tendency to I'm trying to process what he or she just said, and I have a lot of words coming off my mouth that creates confusion maybe, and because I'm looking for where should we go next, and so it's I would like to shorten that and be more on point in terms of where do we go next.
I'll let Carol talk to you about the blessed pause.
Yes, that's one of those, some of you have heard me talk about that before. Caroline, this is a marvelous moment to pause much longer than you think you need to. I'm going to encourage you to experiment with the idea of pausing till it feels a bit uncomfortable for you. Two reasons for doing that. There's probably many, many more, but two big reasons. One is, that might be a little surprising, you need to give your client the space to think about what they just said. I'm sure all of you have experienced the fact that you have said something and then all of a sudden you said, whoa, that sounded a whole lot better in my head than it did when I said it out loud. That's true for clients as well. I have mentor coached many a very good coach that said, did I really say that? So take the time and give your client time to think that and process it. Oftentimes you will get additional information from your client. But the second reason for that space is for you to think about what you're going to ask and not be asking while you're talking, flying the plane and building it at the same time. And that will give you the opportunity not to figure out where you should go, because that's what the client's job is, but for you to figure out what kind of question might evoke new awareness for this client, not something they already know, but this sounded like this to me. What happens for you when I say that? Kind of new awareness. Yeah. So I do call it the blessed pause. It is your help think of it like sitting, and almost I often have clients actually coaches sit back in their chair to almost feel like, okay, this is my time to breathe a few minutes and really contemplate what would be the most useful thing for me to ask that would help my client move beyond where they are right now.
Yeah. It's so interesting because at one way, we have to keep the big picture in mind, right? That helps us understand what is behind the perspective that someone has that's challenging them. And then on the other hand, we want to follow the client. So your job it's a tricky business. It's not easy. I mean, very good coaches make it look easy, but that whole idea of holding those two things equally is what coaching presence is all about, right? I can be in the moment while I'm collecting data about what's coming up for me, what thought or intuitive thought, observation am I experiencing as a result of the collective thing I heard so far. That in my opinion is really what makes a masterful coach, being able to do that. I met someone yesterday and another coach, and we were chatting about using music in training. And it was funny because he said, it seems that you had all the words right at your fingertips. And I said, well, part of it is that there are, like Carol just said, and what do you see about that? You could share almost anything with anybody if you add that invitation, right? I'm sensing, it sounds like I have a thought, something just popped into my head. Can I share it with you? And then asking them, what comes up when I say that? What do you think? Or how does that land on you? All right. That's the invitation that helps you get to share what you think will really help the client. Evocative, evoking awareness is evocative. All right. Some might even say provocative. Your job is to interrupt their current frame of mind to open it up to something else. So when we do the course, and I'm going to share my screen here. I had it here a minute ago. No, that's not it. I had it open. I was all, oh, here it is. But then I have to go back here. Then I have to go back to sharing the screen because it wasn't up. I think I need to, get Zoom to be more accommodating to me.
Let me know how that goes.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, coming in and out of the thing, it's just crazy. All right, so here we go. So let's see, this is not what I'm looking for. This is not what I'm looking for. It's this. All right, so let me move this up. So this is straight out of the course. Like I'm sharing with you a week. I think we do it in week 8.
Merci, this is not visible in the sense of it's larger than the screen. Is there a way to bring it to size?
How's that?
Just up the top left-hand side of your screen, you should be able to reduce it to, I don't know, 75% or something.
View, zoom in.
Yeah,
Nope.
zoom in.
Or zoom out.
Yeah, zoom out. It would be better, not zoom in.
Yeah, thank you, Iz. So it's a little better, right, guys? Okay. So this is what we do in week 9. We don't start out here. The course is like a building block. We start with like one thing, practice it, one thing, we practice it. But this is really very valuable if you want to fine tune your coaching. Like Angela said, maybe get back to the basics a little, but maybe the reason we jump into fix it or to solve it is for many reasons, but this helps you not do that. So we talk about all the resources. So what is direct communication? It is not rude. It is not aggressive. It is not, think about your intention. We talk about intention all the time in coaching. What is your intention in asking this? Are we trying to be brilliant coaches? Are we thinking, oh, if I say this, it'll lead them to where I think they have to go? We don't, this is very, very honest. We all have these challenges as coaches. But I'm sorry, I can't. Was there somebody who said something? Oh, all right.
Merci, the screen hasn't changed any. I'm not sure if you have a way to.
Oh, dear. All right, I don't know. So you can't see anything.
You can see half of a sentence.
Okay, let's get rid of that. Let me put this down. All right, I'm just gonna wing it.
So while you're doing that, I'll jump in with
right ahead.
Because this kind of flows into Angela's comment earlier about feeling as though we sort of fall into advice giving. One of the positions I would love for you all to consider and really try to experiment with as well is the fact that we are there to assist our client with raising their level of observation of their own life as opposed to being in the middle of it. So think about the fact that they're going to come to you in the middle of their own life. And so the questions that you want to ask, which hopefully, Angela, will keep us out of the advice giving business as we practice it, is to help them to observe what's going on in their own life. I'll use an analogy that might help. If you think of, you have an invisible conveyor belt inside of you, and you have thoughts that are placed on it, you have emotions that are placed on it, you have some gut feelings that are placed on this conveyor belt. And the conveyor belt is entitled bias. That's what we have. That's our bias. So the first time that that conveyor belt comes, or those thoughts come out, is when we speak them. So that's your first light that's shining on them, is the speaking of them. The second light that's shining on them as you as a coach making an observation, which is another way of thinking of direct communication.
Yes.
You're making an observation, and then to be sure that you're fully partnering with your client, you're going to ask them what comes up for them when you say that out loud, because that also fulfills the ICF obligation for us to constantly partner with our client. Don't ever make an observation or even take a breath after an observation until you've asked a question.
Yeah.
Whatever your observation, don't ever do that. Really, really, really get in the habit of observation smack up against a question and then let it go. Because if we leave a hole there with that observation, then our client has that moment to sort of what Emily said, maybe get their feelings kind of entangled in it, as opposed to the fact that you really want to draw them into thinking about what you just said. Remember that the value you provide, and this might help you as well, Angela, the value you provide is your point of view, your observations. It's not your advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing that comes up a lot of times is, so how do I know if I'm not leading, right? I think that is also a barrier to direct communication. Like, what if what I'm saying sounds like an opinion or leading? That's what that end question helps you do, right? And before you even share one, as Carol mentioned, pause. What's my intention here? Because sometimes I'll have a thought, but my intention is to share it, but I'm ahead of the client. I'm not following them. So I need to I put it aside. And I like the analogy that in coaching, right, there's an oyster. And the gelatinous part is judgment on the part of the coach. It's going to be there. Your job is to notice, be aware, and let go of the judgment so you can see the pearl in what came into your head. Because under every judgment, there is information for the coach. So somebody comes to coaching and they say, I'm really struggling. Took me so long to get this job. I really, really love it, but I'm afraid I can't keep up with people who've been here several years, and I'm worried that it's, I'm going to get off on the wrong foot. So here's what went through my head. You're just got the job, and now you're comparing it to people who have been here for several years. Contradiction. And we don't need to know what the job is. We don't want to. He or she told us what the issue is. It's comparing himself. It's apples and oranges. So in my head, it might sound like this. How come you're comparing yourself to someone else? Okay, throw that out. That wording is judgmental. But if I said, I'm curious, what has you comparing yourself to people who have been there much longer than you? Easier to digest, but it started with a judgment. this is where people are like, I can't be no, you're not a Buddhist monk on the top of a mountain. You're going to have judgments. Use them. They are often the most powerful indication of what you're observing minus the judgment. And in that case, it's a thought, it's an idea, it's an intuition, which now I'm going to try to share my screen, say a little prayer to Zoom gods. All right, here we go. So can you guys see this?
Yes, that works well.
Oh, good. All right. So direct communication means telling it like it is to elicit a positive outcome for the client. That's the only reason you share these things, is that you sense in your coach wisdom that this is something you want to put in front of your client for consideration. It's an offering or an invite. It's not direction, advice, or a solution. So as I said earlier in the thing, I'm one of those people who thinks direct communication shouldn't be under evoking awareness. It should be its own competency. So what does it really mean? It means to be clear, articulate, and direct. So sometimes we tippy toe up to the observation. We're like, well, you know, and we just put a lot of words in there because we're trying to soften you know, the thing we need to say. And so we never say it directly. And then we wonder why maybe the client's not getting it. And then I generally learned that I would then subtly try to get them to see what I was seeing, which is leading. So we reframe and we articulate to help the client understand from another point of view. And that's reframing, isn't it? It clearly states coaching objectives, meeting agenda, purpose of techniques, of course. So when you're sharing something, keep in mind, what is the purpose? You use language that's respectful. To go back to what Carol said, we have to be aware of our biases. When I first started to write this, direct communication means, the phrase that came into my mind was calling a spade a spade. I wasn't certain if it was a racial implication, so I checked it out. And it is. It didn't start out that way, but it started out as a gardening tool. But that's what it's come to mean in our world. So your language is so important. And knowing how you tend to lean, and as that conveyor belt comes up, as Carol calls it, know thyself. Know your biases, all right? Don't have a bias, awareness, judgment for having the bias, and now you've made yourself bad. Doesn't help, doesn't work. And this is my favorite, and I think Carol will agree with me, using metaphor and analogy to illustrate a point or paint a verbal picture. So what do you want to add to that, Carol?
You know, what I would love to add to that, Merci, is to piggyback on your marvelous oyster metaphor in true coaching fashion, to think about another aspect of the oyster, and that is that when grit or dirt or sand, in the case of the oyster, gets into that oyster, it's an irritant. And the gelatinous substance is used to cover over that irritant and make it eventually into a beautiful pearl. What a wonderful analogy for us to think about the beauty of direct communication. It might initially be an irritant. It might initially be uncomfortable. And yet one of the things that we coaches have a tendency to do incorrectly is to spare our clients from discomfort, rather than allowing our clients to experience the discomfort for their own growth. And if you really think about that wonderful metaphor that Merci used, that's exactly what's going to happen. Sometimes things that they discover in a coaching session are going to be uncomfortable, and they will cause them discomfort. And quite frankly, let's be honest, they're going to cause us discomfort too. But if we allow that discomfort to sit and allow them to grow that gelatinous substance that might be going on in their own mind and thinking about, how can I make this situation come out as a pearl, as
Yeah.
opposed to sparing them from that. The analogy that goes with sparing them from that is, for example, to use a butterfly. And if we were to open the chrysalis before the butterfly was ready to fly, the butterfly would die, because the blood flow would have not gone into their wings through the struggle in order for them to be able to fly. So hopefully that will help you in thinking about direct communication a different way. We're not trying to lead them a certain way. We're just making an observation, because the value of our point of view is what the client needs. Doesn't mean they're going to accept it, but all it's done was sort of jar the situation at the moment to sort of think about what else is possible.
Exactly. Can't emphasize enough that growth happens as a result of discomfort. That, you know that from your own journey in life, right? I mean, I recently did an exercise with a group where you plotted your peaks and your valleys. And one of the people in the group said, you know, what I'm noticing is the valleys are your peaks, because they're the same. It's when something happened that you consider not pleasant or comfortable, it generally leads you on to some new way of doing something or seeing something, right? Life throws us a lot of curveballs. And, you know, when I first saw this exercise of peaks and valleys, part of me wanted to say, wait a minute, this is like, you know, sort of good and bad. And I think we have to wrap our heads around that life is, the very essence of life is peaks and valleys, right? But we do have a mindset at times that we want to avoid the discomfort. And as Carol said, it can be uncomfortable for you as the coach. But remember why you're doing this, right? You came to this to help people. Actually, you came to this to help people help themselves. And we want to remember that. We don't want to rob them of the opportunity to consider something that might be a little jolting. But it, you know, I know in my own life, sometimes I remember a coach said to me, so I was dealing with weight issues, and she said, so what's the benefit of being overweight? And I thought she was crazy. And I gave her a big old, in my New York way. Wow, I never forgot that thought. Remember they say coaching happens in between sessions. So you never know what you lend to their awareness, right? They could even push back in the session and come back next week and say something that said, I thought about that, and that happens all the time. So the key is to remember to soften the delivery of your observation. This comes out of Marion Franklin's work. Soften the delivery, but not the message. And metaphor is one way we do this, right? It sounds, really the actual verbiage, it sounds like someone who. What do you hear? What's powerful about it sounds like someone who, and you put your observation next? What do you think is the impact of that statement when you're sharing something directly with a client? Anyone have any thoughts? It sounds like someone who. Okay, let me do it this way. Compared to, it sounds like you are fill in the blank. So you see the difference. One is a bit, go ahead, Emily. And
Oh, I was gonna say, I hear from Carol all the time, so I feel like I'm cheating answering this question, but yeah, the you isn't in there. So you're not saying, oh, Merci, it sounds like you're comparing apples and oranges, and then you get offended saying,
Yeah.
well, what are you talking about? And when you say, sounds like someone, you can see it as anybody, your neighbor, your mom, whoever, it's somebody else, and you can look at it objectively.
Yeah, like I think it was Jamila said, yeah, it's not as offensive. It's easier to take in. It doesn't provoke as much defensiveness.
And it gives your client a chance to observe their statements or their life as opposed to swallowing it.
Good point. Izzy.
Well, thank you, Carol, for sharing that observation. As a delivery, it does soften the thing, because now you're not pointing at the client that you work with. You're actually you're generalizing the whole message as to pointing and judging and saying, but you in this position and you, as in taking it away and say, it sounds like someone that could be anybody, could be you, for instance, that you know, and then bringing in an example that might, you know, soften the person as well, because you never know what state of mind that person is. And when you go ahead and you just hitting the wall with them, then the both of you don't know where you are, and then it turns into, I would say, an uncomfortable session, because now you're trying to help the person, but you're not helping. So it makes sense, maybe not, but in the meantime, I was trying my best here. So yeah.
Yes, you're delightful, Izzy. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's true. That's true. I'd like to share, you know, Carol and I will share some of the examples we use in the course, and then I'll put them, you know, in the chat so you can see them. But initially I'll share my screen, and then we'll go into a breakout room. And I think we'll put 3 people in. That way you can discuss what you would say, you know, because I'm going to give you a scenario, what you would say, what would be your first question, what would be your reflection. And generally, Carol and I are of the mind that when a client is telling you what's going on, you know, they first come into the session to remember that the topic is not the agenda, right? So we want to remember that. We need to explore a little bit. And the first thing you do when a client finishes what they are focusing on is to reflect back crisply in a summary way what you heard. And it would be more about the perspective of the person, you know, almost asking yourself, what idea or thought is getting in the way for this person? You never ask the question, but you keep it in mind. It's a way to kind of filter out what you heard. And then you ask right away, you ask the first question. And it's not, am I right? Tell me more or describe for me. They're not questions. All right. And if you want more information, ask for it like a coach. What did you mean by freedom? You know, you use the word bullying. What has you using that word? All right. That's some of those first questions. They go right to the heart of the perspective. Carol, would you say something before I share my screen again?
No, I think that was good. I think I will pull back for just a half a second on the question that was asked about, and actually you said something about making a suggestion in our question. I often call those quagestions, which are suggestions that are carefully masquerading as a question, you know, such as, what if you went into your boss and told him what you think? Well, that's clearly a suggestion that we just phrased as a question. And the way to kind of catch ourselves with that is, do we have what we think is a solution and we're trying to turn around and ask it as a question? That might be a good way to keep it in your mind, that our observation needs to be very open-handed. You know, this is just what I'm observing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think suggestions is an interesting word, because it doesn't mean you know, it's just an offering or an idea. If you look at the true word of it, but how it's become used is like advice. So, you know, if a bunch of you were sitting around and someone said, where do you want to go to lunch? And you said, well, I suggest this place. It's kind of nice. What do you think? Right? That's perfectly okay in coaching. Just, it's hard to know what your intention is in that moment. So, you know, if in Carol's example of what if you went into your boss, you could say, so what else is possible? What else could you do? You know, because they may be stuck. Then you want to know what has you stuck. So I put up my screen. Let me know. Can you see this? All right.
Yep.
So this comes from the course. And the first scenario here is, it seems wrong that I'm taking money for coaching. I don't have that much experience and recently finished training. Since I don't really know what I'm doing, I feel like a fraud. I think some coaches here can actually, you know, remember or feel occasionally like this. So typically people want to dilute this, right? They're afraid to just come right out. So instead of, you know, sort of softening the delivery, they soften the whole thing and it's less impactful. So here are some typical things that people say, coaches say. What can you do to feel better? If they knew, they would have said it. I hate obvious questions. When I'm being coached, if you ask me something I already said, I get very frustrated. But if you're coaching me, you know that. How does it make you feel? Be sure they haven't already expressed that. So you're not feeling good about what you offer. How can you change it? Okay. In the beginning, they really haven't had any new awareness. They haven't lessened their grip on their current perspective. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a tiny opening. So I hear you're worried about being a new coach because you just finished training and you don't have experience and you're feeling like you deserve to get paid and too wordy. That's what I mean by tippy-toeing up to your observation. All right. What would you like to feel instead? Not one of my favorite questions. That question early on doesn't work. Later on, you know, when they've had some awareness and they're talking about what could they do going forward, then that question makes sense, but not in the very beginning and not when you want to share something evocative. Yeah, so this is it. It might be avoiding the obvious. So here we go. The direct communication approach. It sounds as though there's a feeling of not being authentic, perhaps somewhat like an imposter. What do you think of that? And somebody, you know, might even say it sounds like as though there's a, you know, a feeling of being a fraud, to use their words. All right. What you see here is we used a rather pointed word, you know, some people would say harsh, and like imposter. But when you do that, you have to explain or define what you mean. So here she said not being authentic, like an imposter, right? One of the ones, you know, I've used, and it really shakes people up, but with certain clients, it works. Somebody was blaming everybody and their mother for why they were working too much. They didn't see their family, and that my boss should know this. They should not give me so much to do. And I said at one point, it sounds like someone who's saying yes when they possibly want to say no, sort of like a victim. All right, victim's a strong word. You better define it before you get there. But it's provocative, it's evocative. And nobody honestly doesn't see them themselves as victims all the time. So the second example, I have a room in my house and I want to make it into my office. But it's been a year and it's still a mess. And I haven't painted or furnished it. Examples of words that dilute, delay, or avoid, or too wordy. Reflecting too much of what they already said, the what have you tried so far? The key in that question, I used it as a coach in the beginning, is the word tried. It didn't work, so why am I asking them what didn't work, right? You know, even if you put what worked in the past, something changed, obviously. You know, if someone says to you, I used to be really good at this, and now I can't get, you know, can't get it together. Your first question is what changed? And it's remarkable what people say. I think, I'm sure Carol's heard this story. Like, I was coaching someone and she was, you know, not taking enough time for herself. And in the course of her telling me this, she said her mother was in the hospital with COVID. Her father had just been getting over it. Her mother is the caretaker for when she's working. So she didn't have that. So she was home trying to work with her children, who she, by the way, had to homeschool. What the judgment that went through my head? What are you kidding? You don't have any time for yourself, right? Pass that along. That's the gelatinous met. So just to say, you know, what changed from the time you were able to do this and what's happening now? And maybe even observe it. So it sounds like you have quite a lot going on. You know, what has you wanting to return to something that doesn't seem to fit in? Whatever it is, it's just a curious question, but you don't step over it. All right, so this is the what goes through your head. What is making this a problem for this client? She wants something, but it's not happening. A lot of Carol, right? Do you think this is like sort of really common in coaching? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And unfortunately, in beginning coaching, it's also very common to, you know, well, what have you already tried?
yeah.
You know, the obvious question that if they knew, they would have done it, or they may have tried it and it wasn't working. It's so important to say to a client that, you know, it's very common for us to go back to try something we've done before because it's a known quantity. You know, what's different now that didn't exist in this time? Yeah.
Yeah, because people, you know, we tend to overlook certain things. But in this scenario, tried is a key word, right? Try is an interesting word because if I said to you all, try to open your mouth, you either do or do not. In the words of Yoda, there is no try. Try to open your mouth. It's either open your mouth or don't. So try is an interesting word when a client uses it. And you may not address it right away, but when I take notes in coaching, it's just these key words I might draw a line between two things that they seem to relate. So here, you know, the coach can ask, what's in the way? What's holding you back? And this is one of my favorite, even better. If it was your office and it was painted and furnished properly, what would that mean? Now that's a way of saying what if, but you see the way this is crafted, what would that mean, right? All right, so the client's response was interesting here. So her son is old enough. The other thing is that it's open to the family room, so I'm not sure I'm making it into as fair to the rest of my family. Okay, either or perspective. Very common in coaching. It's either this or that, black or white, always and never. So you might even use that. You might say, it sounds as though this is an either or. Either your daughter's playroom or it's your office. You know, you might say, what's down the middle? Or what do you think? It to be even more open. And the client said, oh, I can make it a part of it in my office. I don't have to use the entire room. Right. So this is some language here before we go into breakout rooms. Anything you want to add, Carol, before we just go through some of this language?
No, other than what you said earlier, which is that blessed pause. I mean, that's where this is so very, very important for us to think about. You know, what is a way for us to make the observation and ask a question very succinctly? And I
Mhm.
can promise you, you need the pause more than you think you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, that's something that doesn't come natural to me, to pause while I'm talking. So I had to use the acronym WAIT. Why am I talking? And I learned that in coach training, and until the glue on the post-it dried up, it was right in front of me all the time. Okay, so the very nature of coaching is the expectation that the coach will share their thinking. That's part of what direct communication means. If I see something, sense something, intuit something, I need to bring it forward for my client's consideration. And yes, there are times when permission is necessary, or you sense your client would respond better. At MCC level, there is no expectation that you will ask permission, because, once you have the client in front of you, that's permission. But it is a way of softening the delivery. And this is interesting. It's important for the observation to be owned by you. All right. It's not, it's the only time when you have to be clear that this is only your observation. It's not fact. It's not true, truth, whatever that means these days. All right. So from my viewpoint, it seems as though the way I see it, the way I hear it, it sounds as though, which we talked about, I'm getting a sense that I'm noticing something. These are all ways to soften the delivery, align your intent, which is to share what you're seeing for the benefit of your client's outcome. And then, of course, if the client is hesitant, resistant, talks rapidly, or what I've noticed is you get close to an awareness and it's a little uncomfortable or emotional, and they back up into the story. They give you more examples of what, the problem is. This is really important. If you notice the client is doing that, find a way to share it with them. I've noticed that when there's an emotion coming up, there's this retreat from it. What do you notice? All right. That's strong. But if that's a pattern and this client gets to see that, wow, that's life-changing. All right, so let's see. All right, so this is just a synopsis here of something we already talked about. When being direct, follow a statement with a question. And these are some of those questions that we can add to the end of an observation. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and listen to, okay, so how's this landing on you? What do you think? What's your observation or your thought? And as I figure this out, Carol, maybe you can see who's
Yeah, stop the sharing part so that we can see the whole classroom. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Who's got thoughts or questions around that? What's been shared so far?
And we're going to leave a blessed pause. Okay.
Question.
Angela. Go ahead, Lucan.
I find the point about, like, a client can get into talking about details of the story and rambling and, go on and jump to the next thing. And, is something that I notice a lot with clients. And I've gotten more comfortable, over time in just interrupting people. And sometimes I'll interrupt and just say, you covered a lot there. I want to kind of return to one of, like, let's slow down a little bit and kind of delve into one of the points you're making. So that I found it to be effective. When somebody really gets into the details, like continuously, like this is sort of their pattern of how they explain things to you, and can take time in doing that, right? And you're sort of you have to pull out and extract. I guess I'm looking for some thoughts or experience or guidance on how you, recognizing that as a pattern is, I guess, one option. And another, and so then do you use that as a reference point to say, oh, I'm noticing again that you're sort of providing a lot of detail, and as, I'm trying to figure out the language to explain to them that, like, some of that is helpful, but not all of it. And how do you do that without making it sound like all that you're sharing is not really important?
And that's the direct communication, Lucan. How do I do this without sounding like, listen,
Right.
I don't need to know the size of your shoes, or, I
Right.
mean,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Carol, why don't you take this one?
All right, a couple things, Lucan, that come to my mind. I think the first thing I would check for myself is, am I asking a question that is informational in nature? Am I pushing the client inadvertently back toward the story? Could be something that they've sort of already explained, or they might feel like that needs additional explanation for you to understand, so to speak. So I would check myself first. You can do that by maybe looking at some of your own transcripts, try to record as much as you can. But the second thing would be exactly what you suggested, which is really to call that pattern to the attention of your client. It could be an I'm noticing, it could be an it sounds like. What's happening for you, or what are you experiencing in the moments when there's a feeling of needing to explain to me all sorts of details associated with the story? What are you actually experiencing in yourself? Don't jump into somatics and talk about where you're jumping in your body and all that kind of thing, unless you know the client well. But, and you've experienced that with them before, because that can be very offensive if clients aren't quite ready for it. But start with yourself. In the sense, I found for myself personally, that was an initial habit, that I would ask questions that were informational, diagnostic in nature, in the sense that I feel like I need a little bit more information to be able to ask a good question. That's a fallacy. Don't ever believe that about yourself. And then the second thing would be noticing a pattern. And Lucan, it's very much like people that say, all of us, remember, we are all those people. We say things that we don't know, we remember that we've said. I mean, Emily can tell you that when we're in mentor class, sometimes she'll come back and say, what was it that you said? I don't remember. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing, but we don't often, those of us who express ourselves verbally most comfortably, don't often remember everything that we've said. So it's very, very possible that your client didn't even notice the pattern. Yeah. Because it's become something that was developed over time, and it's become a habit. And when things become a habit, we stop processing them. We stop thinking about them. So, but I check yourself first. I found for me, that was the thing that I contributed to it first. And then don't hesitate to notice it. And when it happens the first time, you're going to make the observation like you just suggested. When it happens again, I'm noticing. Here it is again. The pattern has come back. What are you experiencing now in this given moment? And try not to get in the habit of asking somebody what they think all the time, because that's going to keep it here in their head. What are you experiencing now when you're jumping back into the story? That in of itself is that little grain of sand in the oyster, probably going to produce some discomfort. Let it hang there and see what the client might come up with. I wouldn't guarantee you that change would be immediate, but it might be something for then you to say, wonder if you'd be willing to experiment with that when you're by yourself or you're thinking about what you do. Where else does that happen for you in your social communications?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
I mean, patterns, you know, that question, you know, where else in your life does this pattern show up? That's so powerful. It speaks to understanding, A, the way we do most things. It's the way we do most things. So a pattern identified is very powerful in it's sustaining in a new awareness, because once it's revealed to you, you have a tendency to be very aware of it. Even if you're not ready to change it yet, you start to become very aware that it's happening. So
yeah, it's just like buying a car, you know, all of a sudden you see everybody else has got the same kind of car, you're noticing them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just doing that for your client is very helpful. The objective isn't for them to change the pattern, even in the course of that coaching session, but the objective is to be aware of it. And where else does it happen for me?
yeah, that's excellent. So I want to have time to go into the breakouts, and I'm going to share this scenario. I took out any identifying criteria of the coach or the client. But it's a very, you know, I really suggest you record yourself and transcribe it. I use something called Ray Notes, which is designed for coaches. It's a very powerful tool. But, you know, when I'm assessing someone, I have the advantage of seeing it in black and white, but you don't have that in real time. But it's a great learning tool. All right, so I'm going to put in the chat the scenario. All right. So the client says, let me put it up there first. Okay, so the client says that they have a lifelong struggle. They make intermittent progress, but they haven't been able to find a rhythm to a regular sleeping pattern. That was what she brought to the call. She talks about being disciplined and how much she values that. Everyone, make sure you're on mute. It takes, you know, for them to sleep. They don't really, you know, they have a game plan, but they're not using it. I like this. I talk a good game, but my behavior isn't matching what I'm saying. Very common in coaching. I want this, but I'm not doing it. We go back to that. My mouth's getting so dirty.
It's not in the chat, Mercy, just so you know.
Oh, I think it just went to Caroline. Okay, hold on. Let me go to everyone.
Caroline's special.
Yes, she is special. All right, everyone in the meeting. Thank you, Carol. I'm putting it in the chat so that you can either cut and paste it, put it somewhere so that when you're in your group, you can refer to it. So she says she tries to be more disciplined. She values being disciplined, but I go in and out of doing things. It takes, you know, it takes for me to sleep, but I don't really do it. So I talk a good game. And then she says, there's something I really enjoy about midnight to 3 a.m. It's so quiet. It's just a cozy, warm feeling of just like I have my little special place where everyone else is asleep. All right, so your job, your mission.
It's still not in the chat.
Jeez Louise, okay. Your mission, all right, to discuss among yourselves.
Thank you.
What you would say to this client. What are you noticing? Perhaps start with what's the first thing that comes into your mind when you hear this, right? That might be a little like the judgment. And then what is the pearl in that? What would your reflection be and your first question? And you can do this as a group. As a group, come up with the reflection and the first question. All right? Everyone understand that? All right. And the hint here is use some of that observation language, okay? Yeah. Any questions before I put you all in breakout rooms? Everybody's good. All right, so,
How long are you putting us?
oh, okay, let me see. How about like 10 minutes? And that'll leave us 10 minutes to debrief. Does that sound good? All right, here we go. Let me put in the breakout room. So I think we can do 5. That would be 3, but there's me and Carol, so let's go to 12 instead. Okay. I'm going to assign it automatically. Please don't leave the call because you don't want to be in a breakout room. Just, hang back, don't join, okay?
Marcy, could you share how long the session goes today?
Oh, to 11:30
Okay, thanks.
in New York. All right. All right, you ready? All right. Hopefully you're seeing it. And just hang back if you prefer to not be in a group. Okay, 1 minute, wrap it up. In case you didn't hear it, we'll wrap it up. Close all rooms. Hi, Larry. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You and Ramon are back. Now we're waiting for the rest of the crew. Yeah, here they come.
So I was talking to Linda and Lisa at the same time. So Lisa, in answer to your question, it could be, it's not necessarily a bad question. It's just not timed well.
Got it.
It could be a question that might be not, and I'm not talking about your question. I'm talking about questions in general, what we were talking about. You could 17 minutes from now, that might have been a fantastic question. But right now, that wasn't actually focusing on the client's whatever emotions or pattern or behavior or perspective that was happening.
Understood.
However, I'm making that as a generic statement, not about your question itself.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you all for participating. Just a couple of things. If you want to receive the recording, if you registered, you will get it. If you didn't register and you just know me and know the Zoom line, put your email in the chat and I'll make sure you get it. You can always go to coachcredentialprepcourse.com to learn more about what we talk about. But this is a really good sampling. What would happen is on the Monday, we teach a concept like direct communication. And then generally, Carol does the practicums on Wednesday, where you practice that one skill technique. And it really, we build on each one. Because I have found that giving coaches 20 minutes of feedback is overwhelming. So to just deconstruct it a little, thank you, Carol, for putting that in the chat. So, and I think you'll get it, but there is a scholarship option, but I'll make sure you see that. Because Carol and I are really all about legacy here. We want to be known for being generous and supportive coaches. All right, so
Lisa's got a question, yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So, hi, thank you. This was great, just what I was looking for. So we can, to summarize, sign up at coachcredentialprep.com for ongoing work in this area. Is that what you're saying? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, like week 1 is an overview. Week 2 might be fear and loathing must go. That's the #1 thing that gets in the way of masterful coaching is you're being too significant about your coaching. You are performing. And I started this idea in my head and shared it with Carol. was I really believe, just like, you know, you get your bachelor's of arts and you go on to your master's, why wait, you know, 10 years to have 2,500 hours, which, by the way, you have been coaching at a certain level, and all of a sudden you learn new things. So we try to bring that a little closer. Yes, and, you know, if you have any questions, there's an easy way to contact us on the site. All right, so how was this for you? Anybody want to just share what your group thought, what you learned? All right. Lisa, do you want to get us started with that? Is that what the thumbs up's about?
No, I was just trying to say, yeah, it was really good. I
Oh,
feel like
okay.
I've been doing a lot of talking. I want to give other
Sure.
folks a chance.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let go of any performance or concern about judgment. What happened in your group? What did you notice? What did you take away?
For me, it was learning about myself that I still don't feel at ease to say things straight to the point. For example, I'd have said something like, it sounds that to me that on the one hand, you'd like to sleep. On the other hand, by not sleeping, you get this opportunity to have some cozy time for yourself. What do you think about this? This would have been my version. And my colleague in my breakout room said something that I really like, which was much straight to the point. And he said, like, it sounds like I hear two contradictory things. On the one hand, you want to sleep. On the other hand, you enjoy. So I could see how I still don't feel that comfortable to say things straight to the point that I can't even think in that way.
No, but the first thing you said is perfectly in alignment with direct communication. Using the word, I hear a contrast or contradiction is fine too, but sometimes you just leave it out there for the client to see. Okay, Izzy.
Okay, so what I've realized about this whole concept or story is that when it came to discipline, the word try, we've been talking about it the whole session now, the word try. You either try to be disciplined or you're not disciplined. There is no, you know, gray scale between this and that. You either this or you're not, you know, and the matching behavior, should I sleep, should I not sleep? And in a normal mind, not a coaching mind, but in a normal mind, you would scream and say, make up your mind. But in a coaching direction, it would have been, but how would you kind of feel about it if you could, you know, just change your day around, perhaps, you know, have the evening for yourself and then do everything in the evening and sleep during the day. So there's a lot of contradiction again about how this person came about his day and the behavior. Is it an emotion? Did he come from an emotion point of view, or did he just come up with something just to come up with something? Yeah, so that, and a little bit of doubt as well. I suppose that is what I picked up during the whole session was, is this person doubting himself? Can he really come to a solution to fix it? And that is where the coaching part comes in. Are you motivated, or can you help that person really come to a point of saying, okay, let's come to a solution and find out what can we do to help you solve that problem, if that is a problem. Sometimes people just come with something and it might not be a problem. It might just be something that is there on the surface and there's nothing underneath. So that's where the reflection comes in as well. You need to reflect back and say, okay, I heard you say this and this. Can I make an observation as well. So there's a lot of things prior to that message that I can babble about the whole evening, but yes.
Yeah, well, I'm noticing the time, Izzy, but I think what you said is there's two key things here. It's too soon to go into, creating actions because the client is still stuck in a perspective. You want to wait till they have a little bit of insight. And I put it in the chat, I think, to everyone. In this session, about 16 minutes in, the client says, I just want to watch TV and eat. Okay. But it's so frustrating that I can't get enough sleep. Somewhere in between what she said in there, I started to get a picture of a petulant child. I'm not going to bed. And you can't make me. Because there was a lot of shoulds in this, right? I tried. I have a game plan. But you don't have the benefit of the entire session. But if that came into my head, I would say, I'm getting a picture of a child who, wants to stay up and watch TV and eat popcorn and doesn't want to go to bed. What do you think? Now, this client told the coach a little bit about their childhood, a little bit about, there's a lot there that question would make sense. It's direct. Right? Carolyn.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the reflections that I came up with, and now you just said it, and I want to ask you, is that appropriate? It would be something along the line. It means that you feel you should be going to bed, and yet you really enjoy that time between midnight and 3 a.m. What do you think of that? Is that Is it a good timing to go in the should exploration?
Yeah, to me, if you hear a should, and it's very profound in what they said initially, by all means, point it out. And usually when a client says should, they say it more than once. Don't you think, Carol? It kind of runs through the thing. So at some point, to pause the coaching, in your mind's eye, of course, and say, I'm hearing a lot of shoulds. And, there's a saying, when you say should, ask yourself, according to who? What do you think? And you're allowed to say things like that. There's a saying, some people say, research suggests, but you're doing it just not to inform your client, but to make it normal and to give them another, point of view. As coaches, we don't want to withhold all our experience and all that we know. No, it isn't the predominant, a focus of coaching. However, something like that, like an idiom, a common saying, time management drives me crazy in a coaching session because it's not about time. It's about somebody having a perspective. They should do more than they should, that they're doing, or they're people pleasing and they don't have enough time. So you don't want to lead with that, but if you hear it, you want to bring it forward. I'm hearing a lot of, the other one I hear a lot is I need to. So I'll ask my client, I heard you, say you need to a couple of times there. What do you want to do? Right? This observation is the key to evoking awareness. It isn't necessarily your back pocket questions. It's really listening and knowing and being really confident to put something forward in consideration. So, Carol, as we conclude, anything you would like to say?
Just go forth and pause.
Yeah. And if anything's lingering, just find us on, our email is on the site. Just, if something's lingering or something happened in your group and you want to discuss it. Otherwise, I want to honor your time. Thank you all for coming. And I'll get the recording to you and we'll see what happens in the next, couple of months, but I hope to see you all again. All right. Take care. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
That was really good.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Al.
everybody.
Al.